Hello and welcome to On the Bench, the My Catholic Library blog, where you get to see behind the scenes some of the traditional bookbinding work that I'm engaged in. And at the minute I'm engaged in quite a lot. The bench is quite full, as you can see, pretty crowded. I think this is the first time I've shown this, the sewing frame that I use for sewing books onto linen tapes, which is what these are here. Not adhesive tapes, just rolls of linen tape. Books are sewn onto linen tapes or cords sometimes to kind of give them added strength. It really just means the pages aren't going to come out pretty much ever. So this was originally sewn onto 2 tapes. I'm sewing it back onto 2 tapes, so always nice to keep things as they were originally. Over here is a pile of old books from my Catholic library, from my library. So yes, there is some kind of standard issue Catholic stuff in here. I've got a book about St. Teresa of Avila that I've picked up, so Lives of Saints, classic content for a Catholic library. But I think it should also have, you know, a gentleman's Catholic library, a ladies' Catholic library should have quite a broad range of humanities and sciences in there as well. So this has historical essays and poetry too. Not going to go into too much detail about what's in here because there will actually be 2 separate videos about these. One because this is the oldest one from 1892, book of poetry, and the spine has given way. This is actually calf leather rather than goat, which is more commonly used, Moroccan leather. So I'll be doing a video about that, and then the others are actually quite pristine. And so to keep them that way, I'm going to make boxes for them. So we'll take a look at the box making part of bookbinding that I really enjoy. So we'll dive into that. As you can see, they are really exquisite examples of book finishing, all that gold decoration, gold tooling. Very English style from the end of the 19th century, the start of the 20th century. So, you know, I want to keep them looking that way, hence making the boxes. And from this kind of sublime decoration to today's topic, which is a rather humble and plain Bible, kind of hand missile sized Bible, that's just a plain black cover. Before I get into the work that needs to be done on this, this is the Bible of someone who was received into the church this year, 2022, and they wanted a good Catholic translation of the Bible into English, and so they took to Google and looked up what's the official one, what's the best one, whatever research they did, and they settled on this. What they have is the Douay Rheims translation of the Bible. So for those of you that don't know, it's a very important part of our English Catholic history. It was the work of the community in Douay, in Flanders, in the Low Countries, a product of the Counter-Reformation. So the New Testament part of it was published in 1582, the Old Testament, eventually they got round to publishing that in 1609. It took them a long time because of their poor state in exile, is what they actually said when they got round to publishing it. Sorry, it's taken us 35 years to do this, but you know, we are living in exile, so it's just one of those things. The Douay community itself, very important to us as English Catholics, part of our history. Founded by William Cardinal Allen for the express purpose, amongst the other seminaries that he founded all around Europe, for the training of priests for the English mission, to be smuggled back into England to say clandestine masses and minister secretly to the faithful in England. And part of that mission was the translation of the scriptures into English with a Catholic view to that translation. What that meant, however, was that some of it was quite difficult to read, even in English. The translators explicitly say that where they found the Greek, Hebrew and St. Jerome's Latin to be difficult or obscure, they wanted the English to be difficult or obscure. They didn't want to give clear meanings to passages of Scripture which the church doesn't teach have clear meanings. So it's actually quite difficult to read in places. There is, believe it or not, a very detailed article about this on Wikipedia, of all places. So I'm going to provide a link to that in the description. A full history there of how this publication came about, why it's important, the influence that this translation had on the much more famous in the English-speaking world, the King James Version of the Bible. So the choices that these translators made influenced that, but they were in turn influenced by earlier English translations as well, so you can see all of that in there. I mean, it'd take forever to go into that now. There is also an article I came across by Catholic apologist Jimmy Akin about the apologetic pros and cons, pluses and minuses, of the Douay Rheims translation as well, so I'll provide a link to that. Having talked about the Douay Rheims translation this whole time, however, I must point out that this isn't that version. It's very difficult to come across the original version in printed format now. Most of the Douay Rheims Bibles that people have are actually the 18th century update of it by Bishop Richard Challoner, who 200 years after this was published had a different set of priorities, found that the reading of it was, as they'd kind of intended, quite difficult in places, and so reworked the translation. It wasn't a new translation, but he wanted something that was just more easy to read. This particular edition, however, isn't as clear as I think it should be about which version you're getting when you buy this. So as you can see from the top of the title page, it makes quite a big deal of those publications from Douay and from Rheims. The New Testament was published in Rheims in France, and you can see at the top it's makes a big deal about that, and then down towards the bottom it says, oh, and this also contains Bishop Challoner's notes. Well, it contains more than that. It's his reworking of the translation, so I think it should be clearer, but there you go. I guess they want to trade on the Douay Rheims version name. That's what's going to entice you to buy it, as has been the case here. As for the work that needs doing, you can see the spine has split along the hinge, fairly typical, and the red page edges have dulled to a kind of dirty pink, so a comprehensive spruce up is required. Having removed the cover from the book, the first step is to sand the edges of the pages back to plain paper. This is pretty labour intensive, especially doing it by hand, but as you can see, it works very well. I use progressively smoother sandpaper because you want a very smooth, almost shiny surface for the next step. I use a diluted acrylic ink to recolour the pages. It's best to do this in many thin layers rather than one thick layer, which does add even more time to the process. Once the ink is dry, it's good to flick through the book to make sure the pages don't stick together. In doing that, I spotted a single tear on one page of this Bible. I checked that none of the page was missing, and the two halves of the tear would match up well. Because of the shape of the tear, I'll need 2 pieces of this specialist paper repair tape. Tearing it rather than, say, cutting it with scissors gives you a frayed edge which blends in better with the paper below. Just makes the repair less obvious. This tape is acid free, so it won't damage the paper. Please, for the love of all that is holy, never use sellotape or scotch tape, or worst of all, duct tape, on your books. Your books are better off with tears in them than having that kind of discolouring, disintegrating tape on them. The work on the text block finished, I moved on to making a new cover, which you can see there on the bench. Here I'm setting the brass type for the monogram on the cover. Between each letter are slivers of brass called spacers, without which the letters would look squished together and be harder to read. This is also a laborious process. Just setting these 3 letters takes minutes to do, but it's worth it to see the nice, neat, golden text on the book cover. Knowing how hot brass tools need to be, how long you need to hold them on for, and how much pressure to apply really is a matter of experience. I don't know if you noticed, but there was no hiss when I cooled this brass tool on the damp cloth, because I know this covering material needs a cooler tool to get a crisp impression than other kinds of material like leather. Too hot and too much foil will stick to the cover and it looks messy. You can see I've made a card template for the cover, cross and monogram, so they go in exactly the right place and are square and level. Nothing looks worse to me than wonky tooling on a book. I had several practice goes on spare boards on offcuts of this leather cloth, so I knew exactly what was needed. You only get one chance to get this right. And all that practice paid off. Even with the template, it requires a lot of concentration to get the type holder in the right place. Again, there's no Control-Z to undo any mistakes I make at this point. But the extra time spent preparing and practicing is the only way to get the right result. Looking at the images of this finished project, I think you can see that I've gone beyond the usual book repair, book restoration project. Typically I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to disturb or disrupt the original character of the book. But when a book doesn't have a lot of character to begin with, and this one didn't, it was certainly very plain. This was the front cover. Just two simple intersecting lines. No gold was ever used on this to decorate the front of this Bible. I think that's licensed to maybe suggest some things to the customer about how we could make this even better than the original. There's a whole bunch of work I didn't go into in this video about what goes on behind here, the spine of the pages, really. Simply because I've already done it. So if you take a look at this video, the St. Andrew's Daily Missal restoration that I did, there's an awful lot of close-ups of the spine work on that, and the pastes and adhesives and all the linings that have to go on of paper and linen and all sorts of things. So it's repetitive work. I didn't really want to lengthen this video anymore by repeating the same thing again. So go and take a look at that if you want to know what's actually going on inside the spine of your book. Please do subscribe and share this with anyone who you think would also be interested in it. Trying to grow this YouTube channel and bring what I hope is interesting work to a wider audience. Click the notification bell. YouTube will send you a reminder or a notification when I upload a new video. So I can't say every Tuesday there's going to be a new episode or something like that. So, you know, do all those things that everyone knows how to do on YouTube. It's just going to help me. And if you found this interesting, it'll help you to, you know, see the next one in a timely fashion. And until that next time, here endeth the blog. Go in peace.